Shahada, whatever country they migrated from. They're not that bad. They may be a bit stuck in their ways, especially the older ones, but they're not that bad. There are no graves in the masjid. The qibla is to the right direction. There's a basic concept of the salah, basic stuff. But there is a need for an establishment of the sunnah. There's a need for the establishment of the sunnah. And this masjid that you open up is not going to be a means of weakening, dividing, and separating and splitting the Muslims up. But there's a need for the haqq, which inshallah ta'ala you have the haqq, hopefully, to be established and to be independent and self-sufficient. One day it's okay, the next day no, you can't come in here. One day the classes are good, the next day no, the classes aren't welcome. But there's a need to have your own. Or even if it isn't necessarily a need, there's nothing wrong with having more. And there's nothing wrong with just having your own. Having your own. So it may be obligatory to build a masjid. Or it may be something which is a good thing. Either or, whether it's obligatory or whether it is recommended, it is definitely something which is fadil. It's virtuous. It has merit. That's what's meant by this chapter heading. It then says, وَالْحَثِّ عَلَيْهَا. And not only building the masjid yourself or yourselves, but also helping others to build those masjids. And encouraging, inciting, riling up the others, gathering the others, uniting the others, collecting the money, the wealth, the builders, the carpenters, the designers, the engineers, the architects, coming together collectively. That's what the class is on tonight, the virtue of this. The author says, Hadith Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu عن عبيد الله الخولاني أنه سمع عثمان بن عفان يقول عند قول الناس فيه حين بنى مسجد الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم إنكم أكثرتم وإني سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من بنى مسجدا يبتغي به وجه الله بنى الله له مثله في الجنة. It is narrated by Ubaydullah al-Khawlani. And it says here, radiyallahu anhu, was Ubaydullah al-Khawlani a Sahabi or Tabi'i? It says that he said, I heard Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu saying, when people argued too much about his intention to reconstruct the mosque of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have talked too much. I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, whoever built a mosque with the intention of seeking Allah's pleasure, Allah will build for him a similar place in paradise. So, we have several issues with this translation. Several problems. From the worst of those problems is something that the author, may Allah forgive him, has fallen into. And it is in a single isolated place. Some years back, me and another brother in Medina, I myself, some years back, had come across several places in his translation in which he did this exact same thing. In which he translated the Arabic with figurative interpretation, with ta'wil, waliyadhu billah, and distorted Allah's attributes. The hadith says, يَبْتَغِي بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, seeking the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he translated it to mean the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, just like last night, we were talking about the issue of building masjids upon graves. Our class last night was not on Kitab al-Tawheed. It wasn't reading from Iqtida Sirat al-Mustaqim. It wasn't reading from the works of the ulama dealing with Aqidah. But we discussed it and we talked about it. And tonight as well, our class is not dealing with al-Asma wa Sifat, Allah's names and Allah's qualities. It isn't a class specifically geared towards that topic and the correct and the incorrect belief or creed or system of accepting these names and attributes that are mentioned in the Kitab and in the Sunnah. What is the way of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding Allah's names and His attributes? And what is the position or the positions of those people who went against and away from the Sunnah and the Jama'ah that weren't Ahlul Hadith regarding Allah's names and Allah's attributes? In brief, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described Himself He described himself in so many verses in this glorious book. Oftentimes he gives himself a name. He tells us of one of his names. Oftentimes he tells us one of his attributes, his qualities. Oftentimes Allah Azza wa Jalla explains to us his actions, what he does and what he did and what he will do. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ does the same. He tells us a name of Allah, or a quality of Allah, or an action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the position of the earliest Muslims, the orthodox creed of Islam, is to accept these names and these attributes, to accept them, all of them, in the Quran and in the authentic Hadiths, to accept all of them without distinguishing and differentiating between any of them. And we believe that the Quran, the Hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, the text of the Kitab and Sunnah in the pure Arabic language are clear and well known. Clear and well known. And we also believe that there's no similarity, no comparison, no likedness between Allah's names, Allah's qualities, and Allah's actions and those of His created beings. Names of human beings, qualities of human beings, actions of human beings. Even though in the language there is some type of general parallel in the name, the word. Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran al-Kareem, He gives certain slaves names. The men who put Yusuf in jail, Allah called him the what? He said the wife of who? Imra'atul Aziz. He called the man what? Al-Aziz. Naam. Also Allah Azza wa Jalla, He gives people's other names such as what? Allah talks about Musa and Khidr. He scuttled the ship. Why did he scuttle the ship? He said they were poor people, يَعْمَلُونَ فِي الْبَحْرِ, working at sea. وَكَانَ وَرَاءَهُمْ مَلِكٌ يَأْخُذُ كُلَّ سَفِينَةٍ غَصْبًا. There was a malik, a king. Allah Azza wa Jal, He gives certain attributes to His slaves, such as them having knowledge. Attributes, qualities, let alone names. Ulama, alim. Everybody understand this? And ya'lama. And He also says that He is what? Al-Alim. Naam. Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions about His slaves. He says, those what? In the longest verse in the Quran. About the what? Safihan aw da'ifan. Aw la yastati'u an yumilla huwa falyaktub. Allah, He says what? Someone who's weak. Safi. If a person is weak, if a person is foolish, وَلَا تُسُفَهَا أَمْوَالَكُمْ, don't give the fools your wealth. So that proves that there are other slaves of Allah who are what? Other slaves who are what? Who are wise. If He says that these slaves are fools or foolish, then there are others who are what? And He also called Himself what? Al-Aziz al-Hakim. Right clear on this? Al-Muhim Hakim. Everybody see? So the word wise, know, see, hear. We made Adam what? Sami'an Basiran, who sees and who hears. And Allah also said about Himself that what? He what? Sees and He hears. So the word seeing and hearing linguistically is what? Some type of what? Parallel. Linguistically, some type of parallel. But once the sight of Allah, the sight is attributed to Allah, and the sight is attributed to Adam and the son of Adam, or the king, or the Imratul Aziz, and this one and that one, then there's no longer any more what? Whatsoever. And this is even among human beings. Even among what? Human beings. My biceps and Abdul Qawi's biceps. Linguistically, it's the what? It's the same. But my strength and his strength is like what? Night and day. Like what? Night and day. Everybody understand this? A foot. The foot of a baby considered or compared to the foot of Shaquille O'Neal. The word foot is what? It's parallel. Any comparison to his foot and that baby's foot? Like night and what? day. The night of a grown man, the average grown man, and his foot is like what? Night and day. This is linguistical among humans. So what is your thoughts about Allah Azza wa Jal, the creator of the heavens and earth? So we believe is that there's no comparison, no similarity, no parallel between the names, qualities, and actions of Allah Azza wa Jal and those of his what? Created beings. Everybody understand this? And we believe that Allah spoke to us in a language which is clear and understood. And we believe that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Salman radiallahu anhu has narrated, لَقَدْ عَلَّمَكُمْ نَبِيُّكُمْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَتَّى الْخِرَاءَ. The Jewish man came to him and said that your prophet has taught you everything, even the manner of using the restroom. He taught you everything, but he didn't teach you the real meanings of Allah's names and attributes. The real interpretation, what it really means. This is the ultimate disrespect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He taught us what hand to use when cleaning ourselves, but he didn't teach us the real meaning of Allah's qualities. Why? Because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was weak. His tongue wasn't good enough. He wasn't eloquent enough. Any Muslim believe that? Or the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he was what? He didn't want to teach his followers everything that they needed to know. Is any Muslim going to believe that? Or maybe he hid something Allah gave him. It's one of the two. He taught you everything, how to use the bathroom, but he didn't teach you what? The foundation of your creed. He didn't really teach you the real meaning of Allah's face, the real meaning of Allah's attributes. And hundreds of years passed by, then the people say this is what it really means. And it's haram, it's unlawful, it's impermissible, it's anthropomorphism, it's this and it's that, for you to say it really means this. Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. They can't say Allah has a hand. No, a'udhu billah. Hasha. You can't say Allah has a hand. This is a human hand. You can't say Allah has fingers. You can't say Allah has a face. You can't say Allah ghadiba alayhim. He became angry with them. Yuhibbuhum. Allah loves them. They love him. You can't say that. But the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he what? Said it. He brought it. He delivered it. The Sahaba, they said it. They passed it on. What heck is that for years? Everybody understand this? So Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we believe that Allah's names, his attributes, his qualities, his actions are real. They're literal and they're not figurative. And in language that is understood, but there's no comparison between those of Allah and those of his created what? Beings. So when Allah says, Wajhullah, the face of Allah, we believe that it is the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like our face is? No, of course not. How is the face of Allah? We don't know that. He didn't tell us that. He didn't explain that to us. But we know what the word wajh means in the Arabic language. Now one may say, if you're seeking the face of Allah, then obviously you're also seeking the what? The pleasure of Allah. The lazim. You have ikhlas, sincerity. Not, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ. We only feed you for the what? The face of Allah. I.e. the what? The pleasure of Allah. We're not feeding you to get praise. In general, that's correct. But that is the fruit. That's the lazim of that. But the wajh of Allah is not the what? Thawab of Allah. It is not the ajr of Allah. It's not the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wajh Allah shay, wa thawabuhu, wa jaza'uhu, wa ridahu, wa ridwanuhu shay akhar. Wa la yalzamu min hadha dhak. Just because this is what it leads to, or the fruit of it, doesn't mean that it's actual what? Actual thing. So to say that Allah's face means his pleasure, that is ta'wil. That's figuratively distorting it. It's tahrif. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ said. Everybody understand this? The highest reward in Jannah, لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا الْحُسْنَى وَزِيَادَةً. The highest pleasure in Jannah is seeing the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does it say the highest pleasure in Jannah is to see Allah's reward? It's not what the Prophet ﷺ is quoted to have said. He says it's the what? To see the face of Allah. فَيَكْشِفُ الْحِجَابِ. He will remove the veil. And they will look at him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greatest reward in Jannah. They're in Jannah. So that means they were already what? Rewarded. And he accepted their deeds. So it's not the long detailed discussion of this. This is a series of classes, books, people have talked about this. We've spoken about this. The correct way of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So this here is an example of tahrif. May Allah forgive the author for that horrible mistake. It does not say the pleasure of Allah, it says the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are other places in his translation. Pass me that. The noble. They say the translation. No, yeah, right there. About yeah. No, the blue one. And there are other places in this translation as well, in which the author fell into many mistakes, horrible mistakes of Aqidah. Now, we're not here to do a book review on this translation. Is this translation bad? Is it useless? Are we saying that it's not better than most other translations? We're not here to discuss that right now. We're just trying to prove a point. The same translator, Dr. Muslim Khan, and also translator wal-Marjan and other books summarize Sahih Muslim, he fell into that error, proving that it wasn't a typo, or wasn't just a single isolated situation, but that was his whatever, his aqeedah, Allahu A'lam. Everybody understand this? So that should be written down, and it should not just be left alone. That's wrong. Everybody clear on this? Let alone the fact that if we say that Allah's face means his pleasure, okay, tayyib. Why can't we say Allah has a face? Because they say face is an attribute of a physical body. Of a physical body. And they say that physical bodies are all what? Similar. They have a resemblance. So if there's a resemblance between all physical bodies on one level or another, laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like Allah, so therefore it can't be literal. And Allah can only have metaphysical attributes. Allah is al-hayy. He's living. Naam. Allah hears, he sees. Allah has qudra, Allah speaks, he has kalam. These are metaphysical attributes. But to affirm a physical attribute, no. They say it can't be. Why not? The Quran and Sunnah are full of these physical attributes. They say because a physical attribute is an attribute of a body, a jism, a jasad. And a jasad or jism wal-ajsamu mutamathila. And the bodies are all what? Similar and equal. Okay, tayyib, no problem. For argument's sake. So that being said, the wajh of Allah means the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do human beings not have pleasure?
No.
Do human beings not reward? Do human beings not have these things as well? So what's the difference between Allah's good pleasure and the what?
The face of Allah.
No, the human being is what? Good pleasure. Or are human beings not living? Ahya'an wa amwata. Allah says in the Quran, living and dead. Yukhrijul hayya. He says he takes the living from the dead from the living. Huh? Does Allah call people ahya? Huh? And the rabbihim yurzaqun. They're alive. Everybody understand this? وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. Huh? Allah says there's martyrs are what? They're living. Huh? وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَهُمْ. And the Ali Fir'aun, the soldiers of Pharaoh, they were doing what? They were giving life. They were keeping alive what? The women. Verse after verse after verse after verse after verse. Allah attributes the attribute of what to the slave? Of life. And he's living. So, what is the difference between the living soul of the human being or the animal or the bird and that of Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah's life that you have affirmed? What's the difference? They said, no, there's no comparison between Allah's hayat and the hayat of the slave. I don't understand that. The only thing that I think about and I understand when I hear living is what? No. A body, a place, a mortal location. They'll say, no, you can't say that. Why not? Laysa kamithlihi shay. Nothing is like Allah. And then we say what? Kadhalika. The same applies to what? Any other attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's face, Allah's hands, Allah's speech, Allah's anger, Allah's nuzul, Allah's istiwa. The proof that you use is the proof that what? We use. Everybody understand this? Let alone the fact that the only reason why you distort Allah's face to mean his pleasure is because you yourself have compared Allah to the created beings first. And then you had to have a flight square. You had to have someone to get away out of that problem and say, well, it can't mean face literal because, so it must mean pleasure. So you've compared Allah to his created beings. Then you've distorted his names. So this double sin that you've committed. So for argument's sake, the mujassima, us Ahlul Sunnah, the real Ahlul Sunnah, the anthropomorphicists, we've only fallen into what? One. We compared Allah to his creation. And you've done what? Distorted. Then you distorted it. So for argument's sake, you're worse. Everybody understand this? Let alone the fact that we haven't compared Allah to his created beings. We've done nothing but affirmed what Allah has what? Affirmed. and negated what Allah has told us to what? Negate. Now it's very important, like we said, it's not the topic of our class, to understand the concept of the Ash'ari Aqidah. Let alone the Maturidi Aqidah, but the Aqidah of the Ash'ari, the Ash'ari sect, which oftentimes is considered Ahlul Sunnah and attributed to Ahlul Sunnah. You have to understand the history of this sect and the history of its initial founder, Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari. Allah have mercy upon him and forgive him. You have to read about his life and how he grew up in a household of hadith and ilm. His father was a muhaddith, Ahlul Sunnah, that's the house he grew up in. And then for one reason or another, he turned towards the way of the Mu'tazila. And it's narrated and it's said that he was a Mu'tazila for 40 years. Followers of Wasil ibn Ata, the fallen disciple of Hasan al-Basri. Hasan al-Basri from the Tabi'een, he had a majlis. He was from the ulama, the greatest of the ulama, the Tabi'een. And one day, he asked them about a Muslim who makes a major sin. A believer who makes a major sin. What do you say about him? He asked him. And he said that he's under the will of Allah. If Allah wills, He will forgive him. If Allah wills, He will punish him. And his final abode will be Jannah. And then he said no. He disagreed with Hasan al-Basri. He stood up and he walked away. I'tazala majlis al-Hasan. He removed and extracted himself from the sitting of Hasan al-Basri. And then he made his own sect, his own disciples. And he came with the 5 major principles of the Mu'tazila. And they were called al-Mu'tazila. Min al-i'tazala ya'tazilu i'tizalan. That's where that sect comes from. Where did the Mu'tazila come from? Where did they get those principles from? You have to read about history of Ilm al-Kalam, of Baghdad, the leaders, the Khulafa, Bani al-Abbas, so on and so forth. And what happened to the books from Greece, from Rome, from Egypt, from Persia, from India, that were translated, that were Arabicized, and how it crept into the Arabic language, to the mind of the Muslims. And they started using this type of rhetoric and Ilm al-Kalam, this type of philosophy, and this foreign alien thought to interpret the deen and to challenge everything and to only affirm that which the mind affirms. Then say that the texts from Kitab and Sunnah are the supporting evidences. They're the what? The supporting evidences. But the main evidence is the what? The mind, aql. Whatever the aql sees as a good thing is a good thing, and whatever the aql sees as a bad thing is a what? Is a bad thing. Whether it's the qadr, there can't be a qadr. Because if Allah decreed things and He punished people, then that's what? That's wrong. How can you say a person who made major sins, his whole life is going to go to Jannah? How can you say that we can't revolt and rebel against the evil rulers? They use their aql instead of the text, ahead of the text. And the text were a side footnote, a sideshow to the aql. And then this man, Abu Hasan rahimahullah, he was upon this, they say, for 40 years. And then he went to this one, he went to that one. He was confused, searching for guidance. And they say towards the end of his life, he repented and he recanted those statements and those beliefs. And then he wrote certain things and he came closest, not 100% close, but closest to the way of Ahlul Sunnah al-Hadith. And then he had disciples and students and they learned his way. And then he had early disciples, first generation disciples that had problems, but they weren't as bad as the people who are today who say they're Ash'ari. And then for one reason or another, that became the main madhab, the funded madhab. The patriarchs, they supported that. Ash'ari Aqidah, Shafi'i madhab, a faqih, muhaddith, a qari, usuli, وهكذا. And then they dominated the Islamic sciences and they wrote books, they wrote explanations, they wrote dictionaries. They serviced the deen greatly. And that's how it became so what? Widespread. And they're far from certain clear, repugnant points of belief of the other sects, the Mu'tazila, the Jahmiyyah, the Rafid, the Shia. So they took from this, they took from that, they took from this, and they took from this, and they put it together. So for one reason or another, that became acceptable and accepted among people because it's not that bad. It's not saying that Allah has a body, nor is it saying that Allah has no names and no attributes like the Jahmiyyah or the Mu'tazila. But that's not the way of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And if you read, like we said, the biography of Abu Hasan Ash'ari, you'll see his salaf, where he got this stuff from, his chain of narration, and it goes back to the same principle of the early ones. It's no different. It's just in a different way. And that's why many of the scholars of Islam, they would say, Inna al-ashayra hum inathul mu'tazila. They would say they're the feminine Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila are masculine, meaning they're open with what they believe. They're hardcore and staunch on their acceptance and their rejection. And then the Ash'ari, they wish to what? Tailor it. Everybody understand this? So you have to read about the history. It's very important. As we always say, the history lessons are very important. Where did this Aqidah come from and how did it become so widespread? Like the Hanafi madhab. Why are so many people in the world Hanafi? Why was it such a popular madhab? Why did the bigotry and the fanaticism creep in on their madhab much more than the other ones? There's a reason why. Historically. What? Historically. Everybody understand this or not? So this being said, there were many great scholars of Islam who were raised and taught upon this Aqidah. And they thought that this was the Aqidah of Ahlul Hadith. They thought that this was the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah. They thought this was the balanced Aqidah. And it spread even to the Western world and to the Western Muslims and the Muslims who migrated from certain countries. And they took it and brought it to the UK, to Canada, to America. And as we can clearly what? See that here. And last but not least, perhaps, we'll say this last but not least, a strange, very, very strange thing about the translator and the translation is that 99% of the time, the translation is extremely to the word. It's absolutely literal. He puts in all types of brackets, parentheses, quotations, 100% robotic translation, mechanical. And now in here, we have to, because a person could say, well, it's an interpretation of the hadith. يَبْتَغِي يُرِيدُ بِهِ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ. He seeks the wajh of Allah. He wants the good pleasure of Allah. What's the big deal? Translation doesn't have to be what? Word for word, literal. We don't agree with that in the issue of Aqidah. But even if that was the case, how can you make this one thing here, in which is a fluid interpretation, and the other 308 hadiths are literal what? Translation. Unless that thing is what? Clearly established in your creed. Everybody understand this or not? This is from the strangest things that you'll find. Literal, to the word. But here, do what? It's unfortunate. Then there are other parts in the translation of the Quran al-Kareem, and other parts here in these hadiths as well, in which the author doesn't do this. Alhamdulillah. He doesn't make these figurative interpretations, but there are other places in which he fell into scientific errors and mistakes regarding Allah's names and attributes. فَلْتُحْذَرْ. Let these things be, beware. Khairan, inshallah. Let's move forward. It says here that Uthman radiallahu anhu, he said to the people, i.e. the Salaf al-Salih, the righteous predecessors, whether it was the remaining Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Kibara Tabi'een, they said that you've done a lot. You want to expand the Prophet ﷺ's masjid, you've expanded his masjid. Going back to the historical context once more, Uthman radiallahu anhu, from his virtues, read his biography, from his virtues is that he made a major extension to the Prophet ﷺ's masjid. And he rebuilt and reconstructed many things. Instead of it being mud and brick and date palm stalk, he made stone. He made a great deal of service to the Prophet ﷺ's masjid. And size, and also the actual infrastructure. Everybody understand this is from his virtues. Allah be pleased with him. And his clear generosity. Radiallahu anhu ardah. However, for one reason or another, there were certain people who didn't agree with it. There were certain people who thought that this was extravagance, it's unnecessary, the masjid doesn't need to be like this. And Uthman radiallahu anhu is quoted to have said here, إِنَّكُمْ أَكْثَرْتُمْ. He says that you've spoken too much. You've harassed me too much. You're on me too much. I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, ... And in the sciences of hadith, this is that which we call min asbab wurud al-hadith. Or min asbab al-tahdith. Two different things now. Here is sabab al-tahdith. Is the reason why the sahabi or the tabi'i narrates the hadith. And the sabab al-wurud is the reason why the Prophet ﷺ himself would what? Say his words. He saw the man come in the masjid. He saw the man wearing this type of garment. He saw the man eating like this. He saw the man sleeping like that. Ali came to him, said this and that. Abdurrahman ibn Auf came, said this and he said that. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, kada, kada, kada. And then we have the sabab al-tahdith, the reason behind the companion or the tabi'i what? Passing on a hadith and narrating what he heard from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So basically Uthman's hadith is saying, listen guys, refrain from speaking. Don't criticize me, don't refute me. Because he who builds a masjid for Allah, seeking the face of Allah, seeking the good pleasure of Allah, with ikhlas, with sincerity, Allah will build for him the likes of it, what? In paradise. So that is my justification. Whether I'm right or wrong, whether you agree with, disagree, this is my what? This is my justification. I have dalil. Everybody clear on this or not? And he says, everybody got it or not? That's the story. So, we benefit many, many things from this story. First and foremost is, this goes to show that the alim, the learned person, whether he's a scholar or a student of knowledge, whatever word or terminology you wish to use, has the right to defend himself. Has the what? The right to defend himself, no matter how many people are going against him. He has the right to use the sunnah as his proof and his argument, no matter who's going against him. Everybody clear on this? Sheikh Fulan, he says this, he says that, kada, kada. The student of knowledge said, I've studied with Sheikh Fulan. With all due respect, I've learned from him, but I want to go with what I feel is right. What I was taught by Sheikh Fulan himself. Huwa, nafsuhu. He taught me this. To stick with what we what? Believe is the truth. And if we're in error, then we stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. Everybody understand this? As long as we're sincere, and as long as we're trying to keep the proper etiquettes, loving, respecting the scholars, using their example, does not mean taking them as lords besides Allah. Does not mean fanatically following them and clinging on to them and blindly following them and forcing others to do the same. Let alone the fact that in most times, 9 out of 10 cases, this student of knowledge in this Western country is not the only one who's making this statement or this position. But there are other scholars that have that same exact position or statement. Everybody understand the difference? There's no other scholars that spoke about the issue. Scholar, he says, it's impermissible to wear a black thobe. Or you can't wear a black shirt like this. Haram. Imitating the kuffar, imitating the polytheists from China. You can't wear this. Tayyib. No other scholar spoke about it except for one sheikh. And then I say, well, I've studied this, I've studied that. I'm not saying I'm on the level of this scholar, but I have to follow what I believe in my heart that is permissible. That wouldn't be haram. Rather, it'll be my obligation to follow what I believe is what? From the Kitab and Sunnah. Let alone the fact that if I differ with this sheikh, and there are 5 other scholars or 10 or 15 other scholars who say that you can wear this type of shirt. So how can you say that I'm now against the ulama, I've strayed, I'm wrong, and I'm incorrect for going against one versus the other 15? What if I made taqleed of them? They say, no, you can't make taqleed. You gotta make taqleed of what? Of this one. He knows the best. It's his science, his field. This is what they say. This is what they say. And here we see Uthman radiallahu anhu what? Who said this to him? The ignorant people, the munafiqeen, the people in his time. He says, akthartum, innakum akthartum. You've spoken too much. Because I what? Khalas. I'm right, I'm wrong, we stand in front of Allah, that's my dalil. Next. You don't have to like it, but I'm doing it sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the true way of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is to follow the text. If you're qualified to study and to discern, if you're qualified to look into the text individually, then that is your obligation. And the scholars of Islam, they say it's haram for the one who has the ability to make ijtihad to make taqleed. It's just haram. You cannot be a blind follower with the ability to follow what you feel is correct from your own independent what? Research. Let alone if they're what? Who said the exact same thing that you said? Or even worse or greater. Everybody understand this or not? This is the correct way. It is also a proof here and shows us is that the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ could be hidden to a virtuous person or to virtuous people. Did they know about this hadith? Had they heard about this hadith? Had they forgot? Allahu alam. Uthman, he quoted it. And he was speaking to what? The people, the Salaf al-Salih. The pious what? Predecessors. The best generation of Muslims. He said that's too. So it's not Sheikh Fulan didn't say it, or this scholar didn't say it, or these Muslims in this country, or my grandfather, he never said that. That means nothing. Everybody understand this? When the dalil is clear, as from the aspect of authenticity and the aspect of the proper istidlal, the proper usage of the hadith. Everybody clear on this or not? Hadith also shows us, the story also shows us how the Salaf al-Salih weren't blind followers. They weren't fanatics. They weren't crazy about individuals and personalities. Whereas they criticized and they questioned who? Uthman. Who was who? Who was what?
Leader.
And what else? The man who married who? The Prophet's daughters, who fought in this battle, who spent upon this army, who was a reciter of the Quran, whose mushaf do we read today? Khalid. Not no small type of what? Individual. Yet and still they said what? What they felt was right. That what he was doing wasn't the best thing to do. So this is the reversal of the law now. Everybody clear on this or not? As far as the ugly, filthy, stinking taqleed and the crazy, fanatical sheikh worship that the people have today in the name of Salafiyah, then it says free from Salafiyah as the wolf from Yusuf's shirt. Everybody understand this? The shirt that was ripped up with the blood on it was what? Had nothing to do with a what?
Wolf.
A wolf whatsoever. It was no wolf. It has nothing to do with the way of the Salaf al-Salih. This crazy frenzy that the people have. Sheikh Fulan, he said, you got to do it. Haram, And they have the audacity to say we're following the Salaf al-Salih. Allahu Alam, if the Salaf al-Salih were alive, what would they say to you if they saw you doing this? Only Allah knows what they would say. If they were brought back from their graves and they saw the people today, scholars, students of knowledge, let alone laymen, 9 to 5 Muslims, saying we follow the Salaf, we follow the ulama. And they have this filthy ta'assub, this filthy foul stench of themselves being blind followers, and not just that, but now forcing it what? Upon others. And if you don't take the taqleed that we're pleased with, then you're this and you're that and you're this and you're so on and so forth. That's horrible. May Allah protect us from that. Moving forward, Hadith also shows us there's nothing wrong with worldly expansion. There's nothing wrong with worldly innovation. There's nothing wrong with ingenuity. There's nothing wrong with making things, giving them a fresh look, a facelift when it comes to the worldly affairs. Even if it's a worldly affair that pertains to da'wah, such as a means of wasila. Remember, understand this? There's nothing wrong with that. But the actual ibadah itself, the worship itself, is something that is not to be what? Changed. It can be revived, it can be rejuvenated, it can be put into a new package. Instead of the normal long lecture, we now make a 5-minute lecture. Tayyib. A book, masjid, social media. Tayyib, labas. But what you're saying and what you're doing has to remain what? Old and ancient. Old, dusty. No brushing whatsoever. No polishing, no shining whatsoever. Everybody understand this? The older, the better. Everybody clear on this or not? But the way, the means, let alone things that aren't religious, houses, cars, technology, the Muslim is supposed to what? Be an innovator. He's supposed to innovate in the dunya and make new things. Make it easy for the people. Benefits for the what? For the people. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody understand this? And the pioneers of many fields, many products, many inventions were Muslims. Everybody understand this? They were Muslims. They were what? They were Muslims. Khairan, inshallah. Hadith, of course, it shows as well the virtue of building a masjid for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the face of Allah azza wa jal. Hadith affirms فيه إثبات صفة الوجه لله تعالى, affirming the attribute of Allah's face subhanahu azza wa jal, Rabbul Izzah. And it also affirms paradise. It also what? Affirms paradise. Khairan, inshallah. Al-Hafidh bin Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding this hadith and some of the fawaid that pertain to this hadith, perhaps we'll summarize it. that it has two meanings. The first meaning is the person will get the house in paradise according to the size and the quality and the quantity, or the what he puts forth of the house in this life for the face of Allah. Everybody understand this? Bana Allahu lahu baytan, bana Allahu lahu mithlahu. Allah will build something similar to it for him, based off of how much he what? Small, big, etc. Also, we have the concept of mujarrad al-mithliya, yani a house in paradise. And we know there is no comparison between the things in this dunya and the things what? In paradise. Everybody clear on this or not? طيب. And then many other issues as well. He mentions Ibn al-Jawzi's kalam regarding putting your name on a masjid. Building a masjid and putting your name on the outside of it. He says here, reading from Fath al-Bari, قال ابن الجوزي من كتب اسمه على المسجد الذي يبنيه كان بعيدا من الإخلاص انتهى. Ibn al-Jawzi, he says, anyone who builds a masjid, or he's building a masjid and he places his name upon it, he says then he's far from sincerity. Now obviously these aren't the words of who? The Messenger of Allah. So it's not absolute. It's not what? Absolute. Somebody may say, I want to put my name on the masjid for people to make dua for me. However, this is definitely food for thought to be what? Mindful of. Does your name have to be there? In the world in which we live, when people sponsor individuals, they sponsor an event, they cover something, what has to be there? The name, the logo, the commercial, clear as day. So are they giving to a charitable cause just to give sincerely for God? Or is it also a means of them what? Pushing their product and aggrandizing themselves and patting themselves on the back, gratifying themselves. It's something to be mindful of. And that is our modern culture in the East and in the West. Every program, commercial, this basketball camp, this sponsored by Brother Ali's Burgers. Brother Ali's Burger Joint is the sponsor for this. He's the sponsor for that. He's a sponsor, he's a sponsor, he's a sponsor. Why are you doing that? Is it for Allah Azza wa Jal? Or is it also you what? Getting to people know your business. Now one may say, why can't we have good in this life and in the hereafter? I have a business and I also want to support the Muslims. Perhaps. But every single time the name what? Burger Joint. Khayran inshallah. Wallahu alam. Moving forward. He says here, ومن بناه بالأجرة لا يحصل له هذا الوعد المخصوص لعدم الإخلاص وإن كان يؤجر في الجملة. Another very interesting point, he says, this is Ibn Hajar's kalam, no longer Ibn al-Jawzi. He says, and anyone who builds the masjid as a laborer, a worker, he says he does not receive this promise. He says he does not what? Abdul Qawi's cup is a bit what? It's a bit full. Dump it out, brother. He says he does not receive this promise. He gets a reward for being in a masjid, but he's not what? No longer what? Just doing it for the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's taking somewhat. If I understand this, that's his job. That's his what? That's his job. Everybody clear on this or not? Khairan inshallah. Abdul Qawi says no. That's fine. These are the words of who? The Messenger of Allah. The Prophet he said, he who what? He who builds. He didn't say a laborer or a carpenter, a plumber, electrician. He said he who builds. Tayyib. Khair inshallah. He then says, وروى أصحاب السنن وابن خزيمة والحاكم من حديث عقبة بن عامر المرفوعة أن الله يدخل بالسهم الواحد ثلاثة الجنة أو ثلاثة الجنة صانعه المحتسب في صنعته والرامي به والممد به. He says إن الله يدخل بالسهم الواحد ثلاثة الجنة. He says that there is one arrow, listen to this, one arrow that Allah Azza wa Jalla will allow 3 men to go to paradise therethrough or therewith. 1 arrow, 3 men will go to heaven. How many arrows of the Qawi? 1. How many people go to Jannah? 3. Number 1. He says, Sani'uhu. He says, is the constructor of the arrow. Who's muhtasib. He's looking for the reward. Number 2. He says, Warrami bihi. Is the one who what? The arrow. Tahib. Last but not least, he says, Wal mu'ud bihi. And the one who is what? Yani, giving that arrow, using it, etc. To the end of the hadith. Al-Muhim. The point here, he says here, فقول المحتسب في صنعته أي من يقصد بذلك إعانة المجاهد وعام أن يكون متطوعا بذلك أو بأجرة. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, when the Prophet says he's looking for the reward by making the arrow, he says he means to support the mujahid. Even though he may get paid to make what? Arrows. An arms company. An American Patriot. This is a company. I have workers. I have supplies. I supply ammunition to the army, to the U.S. Army. It doesn't mean that I'm not an American what? Patriot. Doesn't mean that I don't love my country and I want the brave American soldiers to fight and spread democracy in the world. But at the same time, he receives a what? Payment. He has a contract with the government. Clear on what we're saying?
No.
Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he says it's general. When the Prophet says the sani' muhtasib is general. Whether he's doing it for free, volunteering, or whether he's getting paid, like Abdul Qawi is saying. طيب. He says, لكن الإخلاص لا يحصل إلا من المتطوع. He says, however, sincerity is only for the one who's volunteering. These are the words of Ibn Hajar. He says it's only for the one who's doing it absolutely what? Fi sabilillah, as the brother say, for free, nothing, don't give me a dime. He then says, وهل يحصل الثواب المذكور لمن جعل بقعة من الأرض مسجدا بأن يكتفي بتحويتها من غير بناء كذا من عمد إلى بناء كان يملكه فوقفه مسجدا إن وقفنا مع ظاهر اللفظ فلا وإن نظرنا إلى المعنى فنعم وهو المتجه. He then says another issue of the Qawi is that the one who makes a part of the earth, a lot, a backyard, as a place for a masjid. He says, يَكْتَفِي بِتَحْوِيتِهَا مِنْ غَيْرِ بِنَاءٍ. He just puts up walls and he doesn't actually erect a masjid. Does he get the same reward or not? Or anyone who has a building and he does what? وَقَفَهُ. He donates it. Does he get the reward or not? He says if we go off the wording of the hadith, then no. Because the hadith says what? Build, erect. And if we go to the meaning and the wisdom, then what? No doubt. He's making a place for worship for the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everybody understand what we say, fiqh sunnah, the fiqh of the sunnah, the wordings, the benefits, the ahkam, and also the what? The side arguments, the branches. How one hadith does what? Branches off, and different masail, different issues. Everybody understand this? خيرا إن شاء الله. He then says بكذا قوله بنى حقيقة في مباشرة بشرطها لكن المعنى يقتضي دخول الآمر بذلك أيضا. Another sub-issue is the hadith that says it builds. He who constructs, he who erects. Does that include the one who commands the people to do it? The financier, the one who gives the money, the one who donates? Or is it just the actual laborer? Everybody understand this? Once again, because the one who paid for the masjid, he didn't what? He didn't put it in the back breaking labor. But he says it's also what? Included. The labor will be nothing without the what? Clear this or not? خيرا إن شاء الله. وهو المنطبق على استدلال عثمان رضي الله عنه لأنه استدل بهذا الحديث على ما وقع منه ومن المعلوم أنه لم يباشر ذلك بنفسه. He says, and this is something which clearly applies to Uthman's usage of the hadith. Because Uthman himself he wasn't building, he was the Khalifa, the leader. But he was the one who what? Ordered it, paid for it, commanded for it to be what? To be done. Everybody clear this or not? Very important concept now when it comes to money and muscle. They work what? hand in hand. Without the other, one without the other is no good. You can have money, money, money without no what? Muscle. Or muscle without what? Money. Everybody understand this? The builders, the carpenters, they need money. They need finance. They need funding. Everybody understand this? Khayran, inshallah ta'ala. He then says here, right, that's sufficient for there. Many other issues, that's more than enough for now. Let's move on to the next chapter, chapter number 5. The author, he says, باب الندب إلى وضع الأيدي على الركب في الركوع ونسخ التطبيق. Inshallah, chapter 5 will take tomorrow, or if not next week. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabina Muhammad.